I'm going to do I guess a nice gesture. If you have a seat next to you, do me a favor and raise your hand, because we do have some people who are standing, and I want to make sure they're aware of empty seats. So if there are any empty seats next to you, raise your hand just so folks know. Thank you. And people will continue to filter in and remind us that we need larger meeting rooms at the town. So, well, thank you all for coming. I'm Dave Seeley. I'm the town supervisor, and welcome to Irondequoit Town Hall, especially for those of you who made it over from across the bay, our friends in Webster and perhaps some other towns. Welcome to Irondequoit. This is the first public meeting of the Irondequoit Bay Outlet Bridge Alternatives Analysis Study Process. That's a long word and doesn't have a good acronym, flashy acronym to make it shorter. This is every time we have a meeting or an announcement on this, it really marks progress, because I recall for the past several years, really a decade, standing down at the Bay Outlet either on November 1st or April 1st and lamenting the fact that the bridge was going away for a season, and then visiting the businesses after April. And I was just down at a restaurant in Seabreeze yesterday and asked how things were going, and they said, well, the bridge is closed again, so it's like turning a switch on and off. And really that we've gotten to this point where we're not, we don't have a new alternative there to provide a 12-year passage back and forth, but we're at a point now where we're able to conduct a study and to assess really what might work to provide year-round access for both motorists and boats. And we have some folks who are helping us with this study that will give an overview of the process and what this study, the scope of it will be to undertake. But I just want to give you kind of a highlight as to how we got here to this moment. The first thing we had to do to get to this point was really build a coalition of government stakeholders, community stakeholders, business stakeholders, folks who have oversight and regulatory stake in this. And I joke that it's really every regulatory agency but the United Nations that's involved in this. It stretches from town governments like Webster and Irondequoit, and we're joined actually by a few of my colleagues on the town board, Lori Barnum, John Perticone, and Nicole Hushla. The town of Webster, Ron Nesbitt, the supervisor, and the board there, and their staff has been supportive. The county of Monroe, County Executive Dinalfo, her administration, that includes DOT, county parks, the county legislature. We're joined here by George Hebert from the town of Webster and the county legislature. Then you go to the state level. You go to the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, state parks. We have Rich Parker here from Parks tonight. The state legislature, state assembly, state senate. Then you go to the federal government. You have the Congress supportive. You have our Senator Schumer's office. We're joined by Chris Zeltman from his office here. But that goes beyond. You have the Coast Guard. You have the Army Corps of Engineers. Really, everyone needed to kind of be in unison, not to have a final destination, but a willingness to look and really, as a unit, determine and study whether or not there's a year-round alternative there that makes sense, that would provide access for motorists to get back and forth, and for anyone that comes from out of town and sees that divide, two towns just severed access in a stone's throw, not being able to get from one. Yes? No. Okay. Peanut gallery over there. Okay. So just a stone's throw, really not being able to travel from one town to the next. It really is not logical. It's not ideal. So to be able to provide that access is something worthwhile to look at for a number of reasons. And I think tonight is the first step of that. And what I want to say is this is a process, and sometimes we say these community meetings, they're just a box to check. Well, that's not true. Because really this is a project and a process that involves stakeholder input. And it affects stakeholders, it affects the businesses, it affects the motorists. So your input really is valuable, mainly because we don't know what the alternative is. That's part of the process here. It could be status quo. It could be ramps on 104. It could be a fixed bridge. It could be a swing bridge. It could be a number of things. But the fact we're looking at it, we're providing deep analysis. So if we do come up with an alternative that perhaps we're lobbying the federal government for, we have the facts, we have a cost-benefit analysis done. And most importantly, we've garnered community and stakeholder input. So I want to thank you for being here today. What I'm going to do now, part of this, and for those of you who don't know, the study that we're conducting was money that was awarded from the Genesee Transportation Council, which is a not-for-profit that really provides oversight and planning services for a number of transportation initiatives throughout the region. They provided funding to the town of Irondequoit as lead agency. The town conducted a request for proposals process late last year, and we had a number of qualified applicants. And from that, we selected Fisher Associates as our consultant to help steer this study. Fisher Associates, many of their staff had initial experience with the swing bridge that's there now, and very much familiar with this process, this location, and the history behind this, the deep history, which I'm sure many of you in this room are well akin to as well. So with that, I first just want to thank you for being here tonight. This shows a strong civic strong sign of civic engagement, that you care about your community enough to make it here to Town Hall tonight. And with that, I'm going to kick it off to Roseanne Schmidt from Fisher Associates. Roseanne.
Wow, this is wonderful to see. Thank you to everybody, all of you, for coming out tonight. And as Supervisor Seeley said, a lot of our team members were involved in the original project that resulted in the seasonal swing bridge. I was the actual project manager back then, and I experienced firsthand all the emotions that the community felt when the original intent of building a permanent, year-round solution down there, that realization was taken away. If as you all probably remember, the earthquakes that happened in California and the funding that had been appropriated for a permanent bridge at that time, the funding was rescinded and sent to California for earthquake relief. So we stepped in and with the funding that was left, developed the solution that you see today. So I'm very excited to kind of come back in and reevaluate the permanent solutions that might be feasible in that location. I remember bringing my daughter to the ribbon cutting of the seasonal swing bridge. I think she was 2 or 3 at the time. And the bridge is affectionately called I-Bob. Well, in my house, it's called Mommy's Bridge. And when we're driving around town, every bridge seems to become Mommy's Bridge. But so this is really exciting for me, and I'm really happy to be leading the great team we have. Our design team, Fisher Associates is leading the team, but we have great assistance with HDR, and we have Marissa Burtz here from HDR and Ravi Engineering. Dave DeYoung is with us from Ravi Engineering, and my cohort here is Rick Bennett, and he'll be speaking later about more of the details of where we are right now in the process. We have a very robust steering committee that is involved, and here's a list of who's involved, and just show of hands, who is here from the steering committee? If you could raise your hand. Thank you, and we have enjoyed working with you thus far, and we continue that process as we progress this project. So tonight, the purpose of this meeting is really to gain your feedback and your input. We are in the early stages of the project, at the data collection phase. We've done a lot of evaluation of existing conditions, looking at the environmental constraints that are out there, looking at traffic, historic data today, the whole gamut, and just bringing that information back, distilling it, and working with the steering committee thus far. And so now this step is to now work with the public and get a lot of your input through this process. We will also be talking about an evaluation criteria process, and you're going to have input on that. And we'll talk more a little bit later about that, but that's the process that's going to establish the criteria we use to evaluate the alternatives that we come up with throughout this process. We're going to talk about next steps in the schedule, and then at the end we're going to have some public breakout sessions. The primary means of getting your input tonight, we have several stations set up, and we'll explain the mechanism to give your input at each of the stations at the end of the presentation. So this isn't a formal public hearing where there's a stenographer who hears your comments and documents your comments. We have a lot of interactive ways to get your comments. And of course, we have the old-fashioned way of a comment sheet. Hopefully you picked one up at the sign-in table. You can fill this out and leave it tonight if you'd like, or you can, there's a mail-in, so you can just fold it, stick a stamp on it, and mail it in if you want to take it home with you. So also, if you didn't sign in on the way in, please sign in on the way out. There's a sign-in sheet. And we also have a map out there with little push pins, and we'd like to know where you're from. So if you could just stick a push pin in where you're from, that would be helpful too. So the purpose of the study, it's on your agenda as well. It's really just to explore the options to provide the year-round access across the bay. It could be a variety of options, and we'll talk about what some of those potential options that we're going to look at are. This is just a summary of the study tasks. Again, we're in the very early stages, that existing conditions analysis, and this is the public informational meeting as part of that process. Once we get the information from tonight, we'll progress into looking at the alternatives and evaluating the alternatives, and assessing their cost and the feasibility impacts, all the factors that go into looking at the alternatives. We'll develop draft recommendations, and we'll come back out to the public, present that information, get your feedback on what we've developed, and then we'll finalize the report, and the process will be finished. As part of our existing conditions, as you all know, there's been a ton of studies, a ton of studies related to the project, as well as other projects that are adjacent to this study. We've got the Route 104 ramps that plans were developed for way back, and then they didn't get built, so we've been looking at those. We've got historic traffic data. We've worked with GTC and their travel demand model, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. The Seneca Trail feasibility study and the comprehensive plan, the local waterfront revitalization plan. A lot of documents out there with great information, and we've combed through them all and gleaned what we can to help with this study as we progress this study. This graphic just shows the jurisdiction of a lot of the facilities in the area. You can see Monroe County DOT owns some of the roads, Town of Irondequoit, New York State DOT, as well as the Town of Webster. And the U.S. Coast Guard and the Corps of Engineers share jurisdiction in the outlet area. So as the supervisor said, they're both active partners in our on our steering committee as we work through the process and get their input as well.
All right. So with the jurisdiction and who owns what property, we can then move into looking at the conditions of what's out there now. And this is just a summary slide talking about the existing swing bridge at the outlet, the Irondequoit Bay Outlet Bridge, IBOB, as Supervisor was talking about it. Originally built in 1998, and as Roseanne said, that was a result of some of the current economic times with the earthquake, and that was the solution that was put in place at that time. It functions by providing 2 travel lanes and 2 sidewalks that cross the outlet channel, seasonally operated, as everybody in the room knows. And the dates here are set by the Coast Guard as far as when it is put into service for cars and when it is taken out of service for cars and allows boating traffic to navigate the outlet. November 1st through April 1st. Those are the 2 magic dates. And as we're sitting here in April, we just transitioned from car traffic to boat traffic.
They didn't do April 1st. They did it ahead of time.
So I understand, sir. I understand, sir. That is governed by the U.S. Coast Guard. They talk about whether it's the day before or the day after, depending on the season, that opens it up for the boating, and that is set by Coast Guard. They follow the proper procedure, so I understand that.
They follow their own rules.
Follow the. I understand your comment, sir. We're on the same. The Coast Guard is not at this meeting. So, if we could hold questions and comments until we get through some of the information, then we can gather comments at the end, please. Some dimensional criteria, it's 24 feet wide and there's 5 feet sidewalks on it. And the navigation clearance when the bridge is in place, so that's the underbridge to top of water level, is about 4 feet. And obviously that adjusts a little bit depending on how the bay water goes up and down through the season. Navigation maps, talking about the water condition in and around the outlet. The significance here is that there's a channel depth through the outlet of 16 feet. That's when it is completely dredged and it's in its best condition. Anecdotally, it often operates at about a 12-foot draft. And why is that important? It'll govern the type of vessels that can navigate from the bay to the Lake Ontario and vice versa. And overall, the width between Irondequoit side and Webster side is about 100 feet or so from landmass to landmass. So that kind of defines what we're looking at in the outlet area as far as the existing conditions. We conducted a vessel survey with the marinas that operate in Irondequoit Bay. We reached out to them to get an idea of the type of vessels they serve, the type of vessels that harbor at slips within the bay, and the type of vessel traffic that they see. This data becomes important as we define the alternatives because we need to know the type of users on the bay. They are a mode of traffic. We do have to accommodate them as well as the cars and trucks and pedestrians and bicycles. So it's all part of the population that we have to accommodate in this study. A lot of numbers up here talking about the number of vessels, the beam, the length of the ship, the height from the waterline, and the draft, which is the depth below the waterline that the vessels operate in. Some of the key numbers, there are sailboats, if you can see this, there are sailboats that operate in and out of the bay, and their height from the waterline up usually are at that 45 feet or less level as far as the height of the sails that are out there. And the drafts of these vessels, including that sailboat, is in that 10 to 12 feet deep range. So again, when I went back to what the channel operates in, that governs the size of the ship that comes in, or the size of the boat. So this is the data that we gathered from talking to the marina. There's approximately a little over 1,400 vessels that come in and out of that bay and operate in there, motorboats, sailboats into that mix. So we have to accommodate all those. Some more data on that vessel survey. The majority of the vessels that operate out of the bay are recreational craft in that 10 to 30 feet long. There are a few larger ones up to 50 feet long. All total, 1,800 small craft can be into the bay at all one time. These numbers across the bottom. The importance of those numbers. If a waterline clearance to the underside of any type of structure over that outlet is 50 feet or greater, you're going to pass 100% of the vessels that operate on the bay. As you come across, a 40-foot height allows 95% of your craft to travel. A waterline to bridge height in that 20 to 30 feet range will allow 80% of the boats to travel without having to open the bridge, without having to move the bridge, and can accommodate that traffic. A bridge that only has 10 feet of height above the waterline only gets you 75% of your vessels. So a quarter of the boat traffic can't pass under that if it's 10 feet above the water. That will become important as we define the alternatives and determine what is feasible from a waterway standpoint. When we go back to that jurisdictional map, it's important to note the Coast Guard owns the water from an operational standpoint. They will set the rules and laws that operate on anything that obstructs that outlet bridge, and those numbers across the bottom will be important to them. So we have to classify it, roll it into the report, and then are able to characterize the alternatives as we develop them. Other important aspects to this feasibility study are the environmental impacts or issues that are associated with the project location. We've done a desktop screening, we've done records research, we've looked at past projects and reports in the area to characterize the impacts of, or to, endangered species, hazardous waste, the groundwater, the waterway itself, wetlands, cultural resources, and parkland. If you remember the jurisdictional chart, there's the Irondequoit Bay Marine Park that's on the west side of the bay. As you come back down from Culver and the Seabreeze Drive, kind of border that along with the bay itself. The bridge that's there now currently went through parkland, and there was a partnership at the time to facilitate park access but allow a transportation facility through there. So it all plays into knowing what's out there so we can develop the alternatives. A lot of words on this screen. The highlights are when we look at the current location, which is the Irondequoit Bay Outlet Bridge, and down at the southern end of the bay in the area of Route 104, Titus Avenue, Seabreeze Drive, and the end of 590, and that kind of quadrant of the south end of the bay, endangered species, particularly the bald eagle and the northern long-eared bat, are present in the area. What that means is any future project is going to have to evaluate the impact possibly to those endangered species and look at a mitigation plan or a way of not disturbing them. So we know they're out there, we'll factor in the report. Similarly, hazardous waste sites, there's a couple small spill sites in the area that DEC is looking at. We know they're there, we'll roll them into the report. And the groundwater, both sites sit over the primary aquifer in the area as a water source. Most likely, both project locations would not have a material impact to the water aquifer that's out there. Because of the type of work, there's mitigation measures that could be put in place. But we just need to be able to characterize the conditions that are out there so we know the alternatives that we're developing. Continuing on, surface water, the Lake Ontario and Irondequoit Bay themselves are classified as Class A water bodies. That's important to the current location at the outlet. It's not as important to the Route 104 area because the Route 104 area at the south end of the bay is outside the waterway and open land. There are wetlands, the entire Irondequoit Bay, the western edge, and some of the Webster side are designated wetlands. We talk about a 100-foot check zone. It extends in some areas to 300 feet to 500 feet from the water's edge. Any project that we have, we need to know the impact to that because there are rules and regulations that come along with doing projects near or in a wetland. Obviously, wetlands being important to the sustainability of the environment and the conditions and the character of the bay itself. Cultural resources, we found from our screening that there's no historic artifacts out there, but there is possible archaeological areas of concern that we'll need to look at both the current location of the Route 104 area. And as I mentioned earlier, parkland. New York State Parks is in the room. Monroe County Parks helps to operate the boat launch that's out there. So we need to be considerate of their rules, their regulations, and the land use and what it's meant to be serving the public for. All of that is part of the conditions. Then we've also looked at all of the agencies that will have oversight on any future project to provide a solution to year-round access. Again, a lot of words, and as the supervisor said, everyone but the UN is involved in this. Starting at U.S. Army Corps, they own the water. They're the maintenance jurisdiction aspect of dredging and keeping it operating. Any project, there's a permitting that would have to go on. We've characterized that. We understand the ramifications, and we'll be able to describe it with any of the alternatives. Similarly, the Coast Guard, they are the operator. You know, the Army Corps owns the water. The Coast Guard owns the boat traffic, if you will. So they will set the rules. Section 9 of the River and Harbors Act is an important thing that governs that access in and out of the bay and the water height and the need to not obstruct the outlet. Executive orders from past administrations have put into place protection of wetlands and floodplains. We know they're in the area. We know the rules for how projects will need to be created under the guidance of protecting those wetlands and floodplains. And then Department of State at New York's level talks about the coastal zone consistency. Anything in and along Lake Ontario border with either Webster or Irondequoit, as well as the bay, needs to be mindful of impacts to the coastal zone. A few more. Environmental conservation, state DEC. wetlands, water quality, how you build projects without damaging the environment, how you can protect the area that you're working in. They have oversight on, as well as Parks and Rec, the New York State Office of Parks and Recreation and Historic Preservation, SHPO, talks about any project that impacts parkland and how they can manifest with each other. So there's a lot of entities that have rules and oversight obligation on projects, and we need to factor that into our study, and we know the agencies that are involved at this point. Graphically, a lot of lines on this map. At the Bay Outlet area, the green area through here is where the parks are. The red area is where the boundary of the wetlands are and the impacts of what we need to look at. And there's one small open case for a hazardous spill that's being monitored in and around the eastern side of the outlet. Similarly, down at the Route 104 area, this being Seabreeze Drive, Titus Avenue roundabout right there. Looking down here, there's state and federal wetlands, things to be concerned with and considered. And there's a couple hazardous waste sites well to the south of the project area, but within the area that we need to study to make sure there's no impact of concern. When we start talking traffic counts, I'd like one of our team partners, Tim Faulkner from Fisher, to talk through some of the research we had.
Sorry, this is Tim. I forgot to introduce you.
As part of the analysis for this project, what we're going to take a look at is the traffic volumes. And really, we have a pretty good handle on the traffic that's out there when the bridge is in place. You can see over the course between 1999 and 2014, traffic has remained pretty much consistent across the bridge in the range of around 5,000 to 5,500 vehicles per day. We do have a couple odd counts. One in October 13 that was done by NYSDOT when there was no bridge in place, and it showed only roughly 1,000 cars, and that was just west of Bay Road. And then down at the bottom, we do have some counts that were done by Monroe County DOT before the bridge was in place, and then when there was a permanent bridge year-round, and then when the bridge was taken out in the summer. You can see the difference. It went from 9,800 down to 1,600 over the course of a year. So you can see the impact of what the having the bridge in place and not having it in place does. Now, one of the things that we talked about earlier was using the Genesee Transportation Council Regional Travel Demand Model. And really what that is it's a mathematical simulation of traffic throughout Monroe County and some of the surrounding counties. And it uses really the residential land uses and then also businesses and where people work within the community, and uses these mathematical models to develop what we project as traffic on these roadways. And these are volumes that you see up here from the model itself. That's not what you would actually do if you went out and counted the traffic, but you can see the bridge itself shows the model shows roughly 5,000 cars per day, which is right in line with what the counts that we have. So we can say that the model is calibrated very well and is a good tool to use in terms of estimating what the traffic is on these roadways with and without the bridge. So with the bridge, you can see roughly, on the bridge itself, there's roughly 5,000 cars, and then some of the surrounding roadways, it varies between 3,000 and 10,000, with Route 104 having the most traffic. The green line you see across the screen there is very important, because when you take the bridge out, you can see traffic drops significantly in all the surrounding roadways on Culver, on Seabreeze Drive, on Lake Road, and then also on Bay Road. And really what the difference is most of the traffic that's using the bridge, about 80% of the traffic that's crossing that bridge stays above that green line. So that means most of the traffic is either going further west on Lakeshore Boulevard, or is going out Clem Road, or further out Lake Road, or destined within the residences and businesses right in the general area of the bridge. It's not people that are coming across the bridge and then going down, further down Culver, down Titus, and then trying to get into Rochester itself. Most of that traffic is headed down to 104 and going in that way. So it's important to note that the bridge itself serves as a vital link to the northern population of Irondequoit and also Webster. So when we talk about without the bridge, you can see the traffic drops off significantly. And what we're doing right now is we've collected data before the bridge was taken out. We collected it on a Saturday through a Wednesday to get what traffic is out there when the bridge is in place. Now we'll go back in the summer, probably sometime in June or July, do the same counts in the exact same locations to determine what the traffic is. Then we can see what the differences are across the area, and then that will really validate what we're seeing in our models. And then when we start looking at the alternatives, we can make sure that the traffic that's going to be on the new bridge can be accommodated by whatever alternative that we're picking.
How many boats are there?
So, with this also adds in with the vessel traffic. When we did that count, the slide earlier, there's about 1,800 vessels that we have berthed in and around the Bay Area, making various trips in and out. Tim's talked about the traffic and the fact that we, as he mentioned, we just took existing counts a couple weeks ago in order to have current, accurate data to help populate our study. So that's both boats and cars and trucks that are using the outlet area.
Tim, you referred to the new bridge, so has the decision been made to do a bridge?
No,
No.
So how can you say that?
What's that?
it was
You made a comment.
it was a slip in that one of the alternatives that we will be evaluating down the road is the potential for a bridge of some sort, and there's a little bit more information in the slides as we get to it. There's no decision been made yet. We don't have all the alternatives defined, and we don't know that cost and benefit impact yet as to what those alternatives will play out. If you give us some time on the slideshow, we'll get to talk about how the process will unfold going forward with solutions. When we like to transition now into some of we talked about the physical conditions, the environmental conditions, and traffic conditions. We're going to take all that data, and now we have to fold it into what is the cost and economic impact to the area. And with that, Marissa gets to shine.
It's my turn. Hi. I'm Marissa Burtz, and I'm going to talk to you guys about the stuff that you really care about, which is the economic impact of the bridge. Actually, you care about all of this, which is why you're here. But building off of what all of Rick and Tim and Roseanne have talked about with the environment and the traffic impacts, we will take that and develop quantitative solutions to assess the different impacts of the potential alternatives that we're talking about, which include existing conditions and alternatives that Rick will define later. So what we're looking at is the traffic counts and that line that Tim defined where nothing happens above the bridge, and what impact the seasonal closure has on that, where all of the businesses, the hot dog row and the waterfront uses that are really summer businesses are impacted by that. So we want to get a sense from data, from business owners, from the residents of what happens when people who are in Webster can't cross over to Irondequoit, and people who are in Irondequoit can't cross over to Webster without taking a large detour. So some of the things that we've looked at are the loss of access that reduces the customer base. Businesses along Culver Road as well, based on the traffic volumes, have fewer cars driving by, which means they have fewer uses. The economic development potential and expected impacts will vary depending on which bridge alternative, how much land it takes, everything around it is going to vary. So we're going to look at that. We're going to look at the impact of the seasonal closure on residents and tourists, the forced change in travel patterns between when the bridge is open and when it's closed, what that means in terms of time, the value you place on time, what you do, where you decide to go, bicycle and pedestrian access. There's the path and the trail that gets cut off when the bridge is open, the general connection between neighboring towns, as the commissioner mentioned, that are just completely cut off from each other for half of the year, and what does that do for the quality of life, the emergency response times, and the impacts to the boating community. So what we're going to do in the analysis is take all of the information that we've been gathering and measure and quantify what we can, monetize what we can, and put a qualitative scale on whatever we can't actually put a number to get a fact-based measured alternatives analysis to look at across all of the different options, not just opinion-based, but looking at the facts and the data and what all of the conditions are showing us, what happens. So to start, we've looked at the census demographic and employment data, population, travel patterns, employment, work commute, spending habits, local sales, sales tax data for the area surrounding the study area right around the bridge. We're going to look at the relative size of the impacted market area, which is most immediately kind of above that green line, and evaluate the magnitude of the existing impacts between summer and winter, accounting for seasonal differences, noting that some of the businesses are seasonal in nature anyway, and seeing what we can come up with. Do I have? Yes. So what we're going to do, we have the existing conditions, and then when we get to selecting all of our alternatives, we're going to look at them in the exact same manner. So we're going to utilize the traffic data and the census data, all of the data we've gathered, to quantify the variation in the impacts of the bridges, including travel time, emergency response, connectivity, environmental impacts of roadway diversion, safety impacts of changing your travel patterns, and we're going to model that in sort of similar to the travel demand model and what happens, and then put a dollar value on it and assess the differences between the alternatives, including particularly what is happening to the water adjacent businesses and the residents and the impacts to those, and we're going to measure and quantify that. And once we have all this information, we're going to go back to Rick or Roseanne. Roseanne, who is going to talk about how we're going to make all of this come together to figure out what our alternatives are.
Okay, so clear as mud, right? So far? You with us? Okay. So, as Marissa said, we want to establish a consistent criteria, a consistent process when we look at all the alternatives, so that we're looking at them all in the same way, and we're coming to conclusions that are apples and not apples and oranges. So to do that, we will be establishing an evaluation criteria, and again, systematic, objective, defendable. It's the same process that'll be used for all the alternatives. And it's going to use a prioritized matrix. And we'll talk a little bit more. One of the breakout sessions at the end is going to allow you to prioritize some of the key issues. And so when we get that input, we know then what's most important to you, from a priority standpoint. Is it cost? Is it the environmental impacts? Is it property impacts? So you'll be able to prioritize those, give us that feedback, and then we'll be able to incorporate that into the evaluation criteria that we establish for evaluating all the alternatives. I just said we're going to look at that, evaluating all the alternatives. We've already gotten some input from the steering committee on the evaluation criteria, so this will be the opportunity to get it from the public as well. So, talked about, alternatives a little bit. There's three kind of no-brainer alternatives that we're going to be looking at. A fixed bridge at the existing location, and I think somebody had asked a question on, what was that original alternative way back, in the late 80s, early 90s that was scrapped because the funding was taken away, and it was a higher level fixed bridge. Had significant property impacts at the time, but it was the solution that was going to be implemented at that time, and really changed the area down there significantly. Changes have happened since then, so the alternative that might have worked back then might not be the alternative that works today, and that's something that's going to be vetted through this process. The other kind of no-brainer alternative is a movable bridge at the existing location, and that could be either retrofitting the existing bridge so that it opens on a frequent basis as needed to allow boats to go through in the summer, but closes to allow cars to cross it during the summer as well. It could also include a different type of movable bridge that might have a higher clearance, as Rick talked about. Different heights of bridges allow different percents of boats to pass, so we're going to be looking at that. And then the extension of the ramps that were never built from the Irondequoit Bay Bridge. That's kind of the other alternative. There are a few other alternatives that we're going to vet as well. One is a tunnel option, and one is a ferry option. Those are two other options that have come up that people have expressed an interest in, and so we want to vet all the options that people want to know about. So those are some of the alternatives we're looking at. This graphic this graphic is just an overview of the various the distance of the impacts for different clearance structures. So you'll see an underclearance, a bridge clearance that provides 20 feet is the blue line. So the general length of impacts of that is represented by the blue line. If you increase to a 30-foot underclearance, that's the orange or the reddish orange. So the limits get extended out a little bit more, and an underclearance of 40 feet is the purple. So that goes even further. So
In the 90s, where was the original bridge? Was it blue, orange, or purple? And the original plans for the 90s?
it was in the blue range. Yeah.
The original bridge that was knocked down, what was the numbers of cars that were going through that, over that bridge during that time?
That was close to the 9,500, almost 10,000 cars.
Saying that if a permanent bridge was in there now, the number of cars would increase going across that bridge.
Well, not necessarily, because there's been a lot of changes to the area, and that's something that we're going to evaluate as we talked about with the what the regional travel demand model allows us to do is put a link in there and look at the percent change in traffic that will occur.
The economic value versus the cars versus the boats, okay?
Yes.
You got a percentage of boats that are at certain heights, so if only 80% is gonna go over that bridge at a certain height. We've got 10,000 cars that are gonna go daily
Right.
into Arani.
Right.
We're measuring that.
Yep. And that's all going to be taken into account in the economic evaluation that Marissa's doing. So, and any solution has to provide, 100% passage of boats. So, it's the Coast Guard's requirement. It's a safe harbor, so there has to be. All right, yeah. I will just say it's declared a safe harbor, and therefore it has to be accessible for the Coast Guard to get out and help boats that may be stranded on the water, and for boats to come in adverse weather.
How many boats go through that channel?
We just went through all of that.
No, you
There was-
didn't go through
there
it.
was
You just
18
stated the number of boats that are berthed in there. You said 1,800 are berthed in there.
No.
How many cars are berthed in Arundequite and Webster? Let's compare apples and apples.
There's 1,800 boats that access between.
How many go
Get
through
in and
there?
out
You
of the
talk
boat.
about the number of cars that go over it. How many boats go through it when it's open? Let's get a count on
Okay,
that. You've got everything
let me
else
just
counted.
continue with the presentation. Okay, I know everybody has comments, and your comments are important. So let me just finish with what we have to present. So as I talked about, there's different types of movable structures that we'll look at. These are just a few graphics of different types of movable structures. A swing bridge, which is similar to what's there existing, a twin leaf bascule bridge, as well as a towerless vertical lift bridge. So we're going to look at all the different options, and each one will have varying level of impacts to the surrounding area. So we're going to look at each one to determine what would have, the least impacts. This is just a graphic of the area of the potential Route 104 ramps, which is an alternative that we're going to be looking at to see what type of connectivity that would provide. The location of where it would tie in will be part of the study. I mean, that graphic showed generally tying into Titus, but it's something that we have to vet in more detail. So the next steps. We're going to finalize our existing conditions research. We're going to complete some of the economic analysis from the existing conditions aspect. We're going to develop the concept alternatives that we've been referring to and talking about, and also weaving in that economic analysis associated with each alternative. And then we're going to apply that evaluation criteria matrix that I talked about that you're going to help prioritize for us here tonight. And basically distill all that, and we're going to end up with a prioritization of potential alternatives that will be outlined in the final report. Then we'll bring it back, come back to a public meeting, get your input on that, make any necessary revisions associated with the comments we receive, and the report will become final at that time. The schedule for the project, as I said earlier, is we expect to be completed with the study by September. We have a lot of work to do between now and then. Some more data gathering. As Tim said, we're going to be taking some more traffic counts this summer, incorporating that information into our analysis, and a lot of work to be done in actually developing the alternatives and assessing them. But
Can you just actually run through each of those?
sure. Yep, we began obviously in December, January timeframe with initiating the project. We had a steering committee meeting just to kind of get jump started and kind of identify how we were going to progress through this study. Public participation is in blue all the way across because it really spans the whole duration. You'll be able to provide input throughout not just tonight or at the second public informational meeting, but there'll be opportunities to, give comments on the town's website. We actually have a survey that can be taken online to provide some input. So there are a lot of mechanisms to provide your input, and we want to make sure that we allow that opportunity throughout the process.
Is there no consideration for the homeowners and property owners on the other side?
How do you get in and out of your driveway if there's a ramp
There's
right
nowhere in
behind
this
your house?
presentation of homeowners and property owners.
It'll all be it will be factored into, when we look at alternatives, we will have to factor into access issues. We will have to factor that in to the impacts and how we mitigate those impacts. So any alternative that's evaluated not only identifies the impacts, but identifies mitigation that's going to be required. Because absolutely access has to be maintained for all the properties. So we just have to evaluate that. Nothing has been determined on what the impacts are yet with the alternatives or what the mitigation will be. But it will be considered and it will be included.
Are the homeowners represented in the steering committee? Is there somebody like a representative from the homeowners?
There are local area residents on the steering committee
And also business owners,
and,
not just residents?
Yes.
and business owners, yes.
On both sides? That want it and don't want it?
The steering committee is a diverse representation. Yeah, we have representatives from the town and representatives from Arundecoit.
Webster residents,
Yes, there are.
typically have a Webster Lake Road resident.
No Arundecoit Rover Road residents. There's only 30 houses. It wouldn't be hard to decipher who the person would be. We offered in November, so that's false if there's a resident on the committee.
And not just,
And in your list didn't say anything about residents at all.
Well,
Please don't stretch the truth that there's residents on the committee. Not affected homeowners right in the area, which was the question that the lady up front asked.
okay, I apologize if I misled. We do have a business owner and a resident.
She is also.
She is also a resident. Yes. Right, but you are correct. You are correct. Okay, yes. So the gray is where we are now in the process, the existing conditions analysis. We've had steering committee meetings, as we said. This is the first public informational meeting. And the green, we get into the development of the alternatives. And that will be our next step. That's going to happen April-May timeframe. And then we're going to look at assessment and feasibility, finalizing the costs of the alternatives. That's June, July. Present draft recommendations around the August timeframe. That's when we'll have the second public informational meeting and finalize everything in September.
there's been something about, a float, taking cars across, or a what? Ferry, excuse me. Anyway, can you kind of describe what that's supposed to be?
We haven't gotten there yet. That's an alternative that was mentioned that we need to incorporate into our evaluation, and we haven't gotten there yet. So I can't describe it because we haven't evaluated it yet.
Should
Well, that's always, yes, thank you for pointing that out, because doing nothing, the null alternative is what we call it, is always an option that is carried in any evaluation. So I apologize I didn't say that, but that is a key point to make.
Still other than one thing. You had a listing that there's 1,800 boats on that bay. Right or wrong? 1,800.
There's 1,800 boats within the marinas that we surveyed around the bay, right?
50-foot masts that go out onto the lake.
Right, we had a table. I don't have it right here, but
Okay, so what we're doing is we're worried about 25 boats against 9,000 cars.
well, I will say this. Let me just say this. What we did was we looked at the boats that are in and around the bay, but there are boats that don't necessarily moor anywhere in the area that could be in an emergency that need access in, and that's what the Safe Harbor Act is all about. So it's not just the boats that are docked in and around the area or that routinely go between the lake and the bay. It's also the Coast Guard's ability to get out and service boats that are in distress, or those boats being able to come through and find some refuge. So that's the other component that goes along with the Coast Guard's requirements of this being a safe harbor.
Was there a study of the daily boat traffic in and out of the bay? Not the 1,800 that live there, traffic in and out on a daily basis. Any study?
We will look to expand the data that we've gotten to incorporate more of the daily use.
I take it the answer is no.
We haven't done it yet, no, because we got underway in the winter, so we haven't had the opportunity to take any surveys out there in the summer. But
The 1,800 figure is misleading then, with all respect.
that is the number of boats that we've surveyed in the marinas around the area that could potentially use in and out of the bay. Yes. So, but it still doesn't negate the fact that the area is a safe harbor. So access has to be maintained for any boat. It could be one boat. It could be one boat that needs to get through there. It doesn't have to be 10 or 15 or 2,000. The Safe Harbor Act says one boat is in trouble. They need to be able to get in. So let me just talk about our breakout sessions, okay? So we have several stations set up around the room that are ways to give your input. And one is the back of the room. There's 3 maps in the back of the room that are titled Comments and Thoughts. And at that station, you will find an index card that has a number on it, and the same number is on a detachable sticker. And so what you would do is you would take the detachable sticker off, and you're going to stick it on the map in the area that relates to the comment you have. And then you're going to write your comment on your comment card. So then we can then go back and we can look at, where all the stickers are on the map, so where all the public generally has the major concerns or comments, and then we can go through and group those comments after the meeting. So those are the 3 maps back there that say comments and thoughts. And so that's one station.
Was Fisher Associates part of the original plan for the bridge that was put in place in the 90s?
No. No.
Have you looked at other waterfront areas throughout, the country that border 2 bodies of water like we do, and what they do for access?
Well, HDR is on our team, who are movable bridge experts. They're national, one of the largest movable bridge consulting firms in the country, so they bring that expertise.
That's part of what we're doing.
And they will be looking at that and bringing those thoughts and ideas to the table. Let me talk about another station. Over here on the wall here, we have several papers on the wall with different titles on them. There's stickers numbered 1 through 11. There's 11 sheets over there. What we'd like you to do is take these stickers and put them on the papers, prioritizing what you think is most important down to what you think is not as important to you. So number one is this is the most important to me.
What if you think that more than one is the most important?
You gotta pick.
You have to pick. You have to pick one, 1 and 2 and 3 are like top 3 priorities. So, you just have to, you're going to have to pick what your top one is, and then maybe put number 2 on the next one. So, that's that station over there. And then we have a station, we have one in the back that's entitled, I can't read the title, but Trip Destinations. And so there's a series of 2 little stickers back there that has an S and a D on it. S is where you start from, and D is your destination, where you finish. So what we're interested in is if you travel across the bridge, where are you generally going to and where are you starting from? So if you could grab a pair of stickers and put those on the map, that would be helpful information to us as well. And then we also have a online survey. There's 2 laptops in the back, and there's also a barcode or a key code there that you could scan with your phone. And there's also a website address to be able to access. It's a SurveyMonkey survey. Very brief number of questions that you can go on and provide feedback for. So, and then as I said before, there is a comment sheet. So you can either fill it out tonight and leave it here with us, or you can mail it, take it with you and mail it in. And so all of this information that we gain tonight will be distilled, and we'll be able to then really hear what your comments are for that.
Could I make a comment, please?
So
Could I make a comment?
we really would like the breakout sessions to happen. Well, if I allow you to do it, then I have to allow everybody to do it. So
Everybody else has done it.
I would encourage you to
I wouldn't
fill out a
I'm gonna
comment
do
card.
all those things.
Okay,
But
well,
let me just say, I do work with the United Nations. I do work with the United Nations, and the Treaty of the Seas in the whole world has not been signed by the United States because they can't agree. They say, oh, but we follow all the rules, but we're not going to sign the treaty. And so nothing happens. And now you look at China, we're going to build more land. I don't know. So how are you going to do this? It's only going to meet these people's needs. This group, not
Okay.
the whole world.
if we could now give everybody the opportunity to break out and give your input in the stations around the room. We will have people at the stations to remind you what each station is for. And we really encourage you to give your feedback.